to the StackCast. This is episode 17, I believe. It has been quite a while since we've been taking a break, but we are back for a second season now, and we have an exciting guest to kick off with. This is going to be Zach. How about you introduce yourself and who you're with, Zach?
For sure. Thanks, Alexa. Happy to kick off the new season. I'm Zach Herbert. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Foundation, also known as Foundation Devices. We make some Bitcoin-centric devices and software, most well known for our Passport hardware wallet, which is an air-gapped Bitcoin hardware wallet. And then we also have an Envoy mobile app, which is like our companion app. And we recently announced our upcoming third generation device, Passport Prime.
Awesome. We've gotten so many questions, especially recently, through our Stack Wallet socials about hardware wallets and hardware wallet
Mhm.
support. And it's good to be learning a little bit more about a particularly promising option here to be able to mention to people. So, just to start off with, I did a little looking around the website to learn some more.
Mhm.
I have ordered a passport device for myself that I've had for a bit, but I hadn't done a deep dive into the company quite as much yet. So, I did that recently, and I noticed you do have a very particular set of values that you outline
Yeah,
right up front. I was wondering if you could kind of lay those out for us here.
for sure. Yeah. I think we're a little different from most companies, mainly because of our emphasis on open source and privacy. I think those are probably our two biggest differentiators. We care a lot about open source, and one of the reasons we actually started the company was because I was personally frustrated by how Ledger, the by far most successful hardware wallet company in the space, and probably represents over 80% of the market, is built on essentially legacy black box hardware built on the smart card technology, which has been used for decades in credit cards and those kinds of devices. And our view is that this new, maybe more, you call it more open internet, right? More decentralized open internet is being built on this foundation of open source protocols, Bitcoin, of course, in my opinion, being, the most important, and open source software. And then you hit the hardware layer, and almost everything is totally closed source, black box. And I think that just carries through from just how the hardware industry has always been. If you think about like Apple, so secretive, so closed off, everything is closed off. And so when we started the company back in 2020, one of the most important values for us was that openness. And we even referred to the company, I think we marketed it as open hardware. And now we call it more like freedom tech. We called it sovereign hardware, I think at some point a couple of years ago, and that was the big term. But openness was really important to us. And likewise, I think the privacy side is so important to us as well, because in our opinion, it's not enough to just have devices or products that enable individuals to, in our case, hold their keys, right, and secure their wealth. Uh, if everyone knows how much Bitcoin you have, for example, and of course that's a big issue because once again, taking it back to Ledger as an example, likes to brag about how much crypto is stored on Ledger devices, right? They know how much is on there. They know exactly how much crypto, how much Bitcoin, ETH, whatever people are storing on their Ledger devices. And our strong view is we shouldn't even be able to know what our customers are doing, right? And so we've done a
Exactly.
lot of
It's
work.
not
Yeah,
quite the flex that they might want it to be, huh?
it's a good flex for the investor decks where they could say, "Oh, this much crypto is secured by Ledger devices worldwide," but it's not a great flex, I think, for customers. And so, we build tools that empower individuals to reclaim their freedom and sovereignty, freedom, open source privacy are all, really important to us. At the same time, another one of our values is actually uh, making stuff that looks good and is easy to use. And I think this is something that is really different about us because usually you think privacy tech, hardcore open source company, you think like, okay, this is like a Linux laptop type thing that most people aren't going to use. And that's designed for the ultra early adopters who are capable of learning how to use it, right? And I think that's typically the case with most things that are really open source or privacy centric. We try to do the opposite, right? For us, it's all about making things that are beautiful and that are easy to use while also being open source. And I think too many companies that are, especially hardware companies that are trying to build, open source hardware, they focus so much on like the open source or the privacy, and they forget that like none of that matters if you don't get a larger number of people to use it. So if you're to think about, what we as Foundation stand for, it's like you have the great, building blocks of open source and privacy and freedom, but you actually bundle up in a way where normal people, can use it. So it's not just something that you, and I'm sure many of the listeners, of this podcast as ultra early adopters maybe would use, but even something that they could recommend to their friends and family.
Of course. And getting into that, your kind of main big seller has been the passport device.
Yes.
How long has that actually been out now?
So the first generation device called Passport Founders Edition, which is this chunky one that had AAA batteries, actually. Most people don't remember it because it was in 2020 we announced, in 2021 when we shipped that. And we only did 1,000 of those as a limited edition run. And I think many people have come into the crypto space since then and have heard about us. So that was our original product offering in shipped in 2021, was announced in 2020, was really pioneering as the first like mass production air gapped hardware wallet, meaning that instead of using a USB or some were using Bluetooth, back then it actually had this camera on it where you can scan QR codes and you do all the transactions primarily via camera and QR codes. And so this is we still sell essentially a version of this. We sell the second generation of this, which is on our website, what we just call Passport. We sold many thousands of that product, and it's rated on some websites like Athena Alpha. It's rated number one across all hardware wallets. When you look at the breakdown of all these different categories, so we're really proud of that, of having such a highly rated product. It is Bitcoin only. And in addition to being air gapped, it works really well with our mobile app Envoy. So it kind of allows you to choose your own adventure. If you're new to Bitcoin, you say, I want to set up this hardware wallet. I want to work with my phone because for most people, their phone, is their primary computing device. You'd be surprised, probably, maybe not, by how many people like never use a computer during the day. They're using like their phone or an iPad or that kind of thing. So you can do that. You can have amazing kind of really simple experience with our mobile app and with the hardware wallet. But of course, if you want to do more than that, we're compatible with basically every single popular Bitcoin software wallet or service out there, whether that's Sparrow, Nunchuck, Casa, all these different popular wallets and services. You can connect Passport to that really easily, and then you can add cold storage to whatever more advanced or power user software wallet that you're already using. So that's also something interesting about us, where we want to make it really easy and streamlined for users that are new and are kind of overwhelmed with the idea of how do I pick, a software wallet and that kind of thing. We also want to make it really easy for, at least right now with the current Passport that we sell, which is Bitcoin only, for all the different Bitcoin developers who are building wallets and multi-sig services and things like that, to really easily integrate Passport and allow their users to seamlessly move funds into cold storage on the device.
And you touched on something that I wanted to make sure and ask about here
Yeah.
too. You do mention, for now anyway, passport devices are for Bitcoin only. I was wondering if you wanted to kind of share your thoughts behind that. I'm sure it won't come to surprise for most people, but just in case, explain the thinking behind that, and then maybe whether or not you have plans to support other coins in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And the quick answer to the second half of the question is that with Passport Prime, which is our newest product that we announced in December and are going to be shipping Likely around end of March, beginning of April is when we're hoping to kick things off. It looks very different than the others as a touchscreen device. That one will support more than just Bitcoin through a third-party app integrations. And so we can talk more about that, I'm sure. But in terms of like why the first two generations of Passport have been Bitcoin only, there's a few reasons for that. One, I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm a longtime Bitcoiner of I guess over a decade now, which is crazy to think. Um, and one of the reasons why we started the company was actually due to a personal frustration with using these different hardware wallets and how they did not provide, in my opinion, a great experience for storing Bitcoin. So, the main two, Ledger and Trezor, had fallen behind in some of the latest and greatest Bitcoin tech, which back in 2019 or so was really multi-sig, and there was no way where you could properly use Bitcoin multi-sig on those devices. The only device that provided a really comprehensive Bitcoin experience was Cold Card. And so I used Cold Card personally, but Cold Card I think is much more technical and complicated for most users. And so most people are not going to use it. And I did not enjoy, the day-to-day experience of using it, being someone who's really into product design, everything like that. So we basically set out to say, let's just build the best in class Bitcoin hardware wallet. So that was almost the initial prompt that started the company, right? We want to build the best in class Bitcoin hardware wallet. We're going to support all the best Bitcoin stuff. We're going to do it exactly how I would do it, right? If I wanted to kind of build my dream device, and so it would be aesthetically pleasing. It would be easy to use. I want it to be air gapped. I thought that was really important because none of the other devices were doing any kind of air gap except some like early DIY style devices. There was this like Spectre wallet, Spectre DIY, where you kind of build your own hardware wallet. Now there's things like Seed Signer, where you can also build your own hardware wallet. But back then, I don't think there was anything that was really like a great product that you could just tell someone, hey, go buy this and it's going to be air gapped. Want it to be open source, of course. And another thing I wanted, which no one was doing, is I want it to be manufactured in the USA. We of course Ledger and Trezor were made in Europe, which is fine. Ledger, their new stuff is actually being outsourced to Asia, which is, in my opinion, not fine. But and then Cold Card, being made in Canada, I thought, I live in the USA. We had been working on some other projects in the past with with ASIC mining before starting Foundation, and we were manufacturing already in the USA. So we knew the supply chains really well. So we were able to leverage a lot of these supply chains and relationships that we had to make Passport in the USA. And so then additionally, it allowed us to stay really focused. Our goal is to build this best in class Bitcoin hardware wallet experience and then companion mobile app experience. And I think it's something that we were able to accomplish successfully because of that specific focus, because we still have a relatively small team.
How large is your team, by the way? I don't think I probably should have asked in the beginning here. I do apologize,
That's a
but
great
what
question.
is your role within Foundation? And then
Yes.
who are you working with?
Yeah, so I'm co-founder and CEO. We have a couple other co-founders, and there's probably about 18 of us now that are full time. And so we
18.
have,
Okay.
yeah, it's grown a lot. But it's interesting because the core team that did the first gen passport back in 2020, there were just four of us, and then the second generation passport, there were about 10 of us because we also did the mobile app, and so we had to grow the team a little bit because then you have the design team, you have the design team working on the physical hardware and the software. You then have the embedded engineering team working on the hardware, like the firmware basically, and then you have the separate team working on the mobile app for cross-platform. And then the reason why it's almost doubled since 2022 or so, when we brought the second gen passport to market, is because we've been working for 2 years on the Passport Prime program, and we needed to hire more people for that because we ended up doing an operating system almost from scratch, which was a pretty crazy effort. And so that's why the team is something like almost 20 now.
Wow, that's definitely larger than I was expecting. It
Yeah,
definitely has
yeah.
the feel of a very small kind of company. So I can actually appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's probably because I still like we don't have any product managers or anything like that. I still act as the product person for the company. And so even though we have a good deal of people right now, it still feels like we're extremely under-resourced because we have the current generation passport device that we're still continuing to improve. We're about to put out a big firmware update for that where we rewrote all of the Bitcoin related like signing code in Rust from scratch. And we've been working on that for several months. And then we're also going to be adding, with the next release after that, support for Bitcoin mini script. So there's still a lot of active development going on the current Passport firmware. Then, of course, we have, all these initiatives from the design perspective, whether it's, the website, the marketing. We do everything in house, which is actually kind of unusual for like a hardware startup. Usually, hardware startups will outsource a lot of the actual like industrial design and mechanical engineering and supply chain, and we actually don't. So, because we do all that in house, that also contributes to a lot of the team. And then we've had probably six six or seven engineers basically dedicated to working on Passport Prime over the last 2 years. So I think it feels more personal than some of these larger companies because we as like the founders are so involved and because we're the ones setting the product strategy. I can tell you every single feature, and every single device. I could tell you every single line and every menu on on the current Passport and Passport Prime. So we're highly involved with trying to curate the best possible products and experiences.
And speaking of the physical product itself,
Mhm.
um, one thought that I kind of bookmarked is you did mention you were able to have these manufactured in the US. How did you go about that? And how
It
have you
really,
managed to
yeah.
keep this, I guess, profitable while not
Yeah.
not going overseas?
Yeah, so that's the hard part, and that's also why, we have raised venture funding throughout the journey from the beginning. So we've raised about $10 million so far since 2020. And so, with US manufacturing, it's a little bit more difficult, especially when we're doing everything in house and we're not really outsourcing anything to like the factory. Because what ends up happening with hardware startups is they'll often outsource, as I mentioned, a lot of the design and engineering for the products, which I think in our industry poses a security concern if you were to do that. But then, of course, they typically outsource the manufacturing to China. But even if they outsource the manufacturing and they use a contract manufacturer in the U.S. like we do, they often rely on the manufacturer to do all the material sourcing and spending, and they basically kind of give the design to the manufacturer, and they let the manufacturer go buy everything for them. And so what ends up happening, I think, is that a lot of these hardware startups, there's like a disconnect between um, like all the costs and all the spending because they're not the ones directly purchasing every single component and all the material. And we actually do purchase all the components, all the material, and we send that to our manufacturers, on consignment so that they can assemble it. So we are like, especially with Passport Prime, we are really tight on knowing every single line item on the BOM, which is the bill of materials. It's called for the product. We know everything that's in there, and we're able to, I think Passport Prime will be a very profitable product for us, but we're able to do it, still with U.S. manufacturing. I think because we're just so, tied in closely to everything. The current gen Passport is probably would be more profitable had we done it, in Asia or something like that. So we're not making as much money on the current passport that we're selling as we will on Passport Prime. And so we have relied on, the venture funding to say, okay, well, we don't need to be super profitable. We're trying to put out the best possible products. We're trying to build up the brand. We've been on market for, 4 years now and have a fantastic reputation, really great reviews. So I care much more about that, in the early stages of building this company, And I think it was the right decision because I think if we, had gone and had it made in China or something like that, sure, it would have been more profitable, but I think it would have been, a real negative for the brand and for what we're trying to build.
Yeah, I think in the end, there would be a bit of a ding on your reputation. And part of, I think, what does set you apart is that right there, because that is
Yeah.
somewhat unique.
Yeah. And I think we talk about this all the time as a company. We talk about how there's always companies that uh, achieve a lot of success and they have their early adopter, almost like cult following. And then almost always without fail, as they get bigger, they end up like burning the early adopters in some way or in search of trying to grow the company bigger and bigger, they'll abandon those core principles, right? Because you kind of have to pivot into more and more growth mode and not to keep hitting on Ledger like I have already a few times.
I don't
But
think too many people will mind at this point.
yeah, I don't think so either, which is, it is what it is. But like making the decision to, uh, or another way of looking at it is like, if you don't have the values codified in any way, then it's really easy to stray from those values. So whether that's like moving their new manufacturing programs for the touchscreen e-ink devices that they've now launched over the last, year or so, moving that to Foxconn actually in Asia. Um, I don't remember exact. I think it might be Vietnam. I'm pretty sure it's like Foxconn in Vietnam is manufacturing that. It's like, well, you build up all this goodwill, you invest a ton of money into this European uh, supply chain, and then new devices come out. You say we want to sell more of these devices than we want to sell the old devices, so we're going to go to Foxconn, right? So that's an example of like it's not the best thing to do, and if you don't have those strong principles, then you're going to make those decisions, kind of in search of higher profits and more easily being able to produce, higher volume. No matter what we're doing, I can make that commitment that even if we're making millions of units per year, like what Ledger is doing, we're always going to be, manufactured in the USA.
Well, I personally appreciate that quite a bit. Um, and you had both devices on you. Would you mind kind of just showing the
I have a
difference
lot.
between those
Yeah, I have
again?
a
And then
lot of
I'll,
devices. I also have I'll grab the current gen passport device that we currently sell. So essentially this is Passport today. So this is what we sell. This is, top rated Bitcoin only air gapped hardware wallet. You can see it kind of looks like an old school mobile phone.
it
And the
feels
reason,
very much like a old Nokia.
yeah, and it's pretty compact. This is just a normal sized iPhone, not the Max or whatever. Um, the reason we did that is because we wanted the familiarity, right? We didn't want the device to be something like, how do I use it? And a lot of this is goes into our like industrial design philosophy where if you've ever picked up a Ledger Nano device with the little screen and the two buttons, one of the first things you have to figure out is how do I enter my PIN? You actually have to scroll one way with one button, the other way with the other button. The screen is tiny, and then you click both buttons to make your selection. I mean, like in my opinion, that's crazy. And one of our mantras is, Bitcoin is already hard enough to learn how to use for the first time, especially if you're trying to do it with sovereignty, like with self custody. You should not have to learn how to use your hardware wallet, right? You shouldn't have to learn how to use these tools that are going to give you that sovereignty. And so with this, it's like you know how to turn it on. There's a power button on the side. You have your keypad. You know exactly how to enter text. It's really easy to set up. It has a nice large, color screen. And so you know how to use it out of the box. You're not intimidated picking it up. If anything, you want to pick it up. And one of the fun things is when we go to conferences and people pick it up, and the first thing they comment on is the weight because it feels like,
I was going to
yeah,
say that too. It's very substantial feeling.
yeah.
It has a really nice weight to it and almost kind of on some of the buttons like a metal kind of feel. It's very cool.
Yeah, so actually these buttons are the top row is metal, the buttons, and the entire structure is a uh, copper plated zinc alloy. And so that's another aspect of like our we have like an honesty with materials that we care a lot about. We care a lot about textures and we care a lot about the feeling that you have. And so feeling like the temperature difference when when your hand is on the metal button or when you're feeling this, it feels, cooler to the touch because it's real metal. What you see a lot of companies do is Beats is a great example, even though I guess they're owned by Apple, but it's still kind of a separate thing, is everything's plastic. If anything looks like metal, it's actually just plastic with like that metal kind of coating on it. And the weight is because they put weights in it. They actually like put little weights inside to make it feel heavier, right? So it feels higher quality. And we have more of that. You call it like a Bitcoiner, like lower time preference, thinking where we want it to be quality. So we're just going to make it quality, right? We're not going to cheap with the materials. So that's this one. Our new Passport Prime, though, I'm really proud of. It weighs a little bit less, but it has the same density. So it feels basically kind of the same in the hand, maybe a drop lighter. But then this thing, it's not copper plated. It's anodized aluminum. And we have these like aluminum rails you can see that go around it. So it's really easy to pick up off of a surface. And then we use Gorilla Glass on the front, and on the back, and we use aluminum on the back that's painted. And we actually have two different colorways now, which is going to be very popular. It turns out I lost the bet within the company that 75% of the pre-orders so far have been for our dark mode colorway, which we call midnight bronze. So you can see it's more of a bronze type color, and this is we call Arctic copper with the new one. So I'm excited about having different colorways, but we have a really different this is almost, I think, Apple level in terms of design, quality, and manufacturing. So I'm excited to get those into your hands probably, in a few months and into the Stack Wallet team. But we could talk more about this, but a lot of really different features from the current Passport, and most notably with Passport Prime, it's not a Bitcoin hardware wallet. We're not calling it a hardware wallet. We're calling it a personal security platform. So the
I
idea
did
is
notice
that,
that
yeah.
there is the ability to use that a bit like a hard drive for other things too, correct?
Yeah, so the idea is like if you want that hardcore air-gapped Bitcoin hardware wallet experience, you can still go buy Passport. And we're not, discontinuing this anytime soon. But there's I think there's many aspects to Passport while it's so easy to use compared to the other hardware wallets. It was nowhere near where we wanted it because we want to make it really easy for the next wave of Bitcoin and crypto users really to achieve self-custody, all the way through the onboarding experience, but then also to the experience, of course, of using, the device on a day-to-day. And like the personal security and privacy journey does not stop at the hardware wallet. If anything, it like starts at that because you kind of one of the themes here is people get into the space, they realize that they can take self custody, but then that's just like the beginning. You realize that you have to secure your entire digital life. So that means, I think for most people, trying to secure your online accounts, multi-factor authentication. You learn that, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be doing like SMS 2FA with my phone number. That's not secure. I could get SIM swapped. So you have to figure out, do you do those 6-digit 2FA codes like with Google Authenticator or one of the other apps? So you learn how to do that, but then maybe you're not backing that up properly. So maybe you lose your phone and you have to start all your 2FA codes get lost, right? And then you have to set all that up again and go through recovery with all your different online accounts, which is a nightmare. Or you're told, go buy a YubiKey is really common, especially if you're listening to podcasts in the space or reading blogs. So you go buy a YubiKey and you have no idea how to set it up. And then all of a sudden you realize you actually have to buy two YubiKeys because there's no way to back up a YubiKey. So now you have these two YubiKeys. You're using them for some of your accounts. You're using the 6-digit 2FA codes. You still have stuff on 2FA SMS. You're using the hardware wallets, and And then another situation that we've run into, as founders of a company in the, cryptocurrency industry is we have like important company keys and things that we need to back up. So, for example, a firmware signing keys that we use to sign Passport firmware releases. Like that's really important stuff. So we need a place to store that. And of course, you can't store that on a hardware wallet because hardware wallets are only for signing Bitcoin or, crypto transactions. So we have to buy these like hardware encrypted flash drives with like pin codes on them. You could buy like a 64 gig drive, for example, for like $100. And then you're using that too. So now you have all these different devices. Each one has different ways of setting them up. And if you were to put together like a YouTube tutorial or a blog post, like how to secure your digital life, you're going to have all these things on there. And that doesn't even account for other stuff unrelated from like storage or security. You might have like VPN or Tor or running your own nodes or all that kind of thing. So it's really a journey. So our goal with Passport Prime was let's not only restrict it to the hardware wallet side. Let's allow you to bring in all that important stuff I was just discussing. So all on one device, it allows you to, of course, use it as a Bitcoin hardware wallet. So every feature that we support on Passport today, is also supported on Passport Prime for Bitcoin storage. But we also support 6-digit 2FA codes, virtual YubiKeys with NFC or USB. So you can actually spin up like multiple ones and label them. It's really cool. And then we also have about 50 gigabytes of user available encrypted storage. So you can put important files, documents, keys, other things like that on there. And then we even have a really cool tool called Seed Vault where you can not only create seeds like for use on all your mobile wallets. So for example, maybe someone would be able to create a seed and use on Stack, right? As like their hot wallet seed. But you could also import your existing seeds, and people have seeds stored all over the place for like all their different hot wallets. And that's just what we're shipping in V1. So you can kind of see like you either go for the $200 device, right? That is the Bitcoin only hardware wallet, or you go for the $300 device where it's like you can store all your different stuff on it. Then the coolest thing we're doing with it is allowing, and this will be coming later next year, but is allowing third-party developers to build apps for it. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But the idea being that we think users should be able to expand the functionality of their device however they want. And so we're hoping over the coming months to be able to work with all the best wallets in the space and work with them to build apps to run on Passport Prime so that they can give their users a really fantastic experience integrating cold storage directly into their wallets or services.
And I'm expecting that these different services that could build apps for the Passport Prime, they would ideally kind of be in the same privacy space. You're not going to get like a second phone out of it or something like that.
Exactly. So the device itself is a little different because it's not air gapped. So like it has Bluetooth as the primary means of communication. And we've done some cool security stuff there. We've created like a new protocol where um, we put the Bluetooth on a separate chip, and then you scan a QR code, and then everything going through the Bluetooth chip is already encrypted from the initial QR exchange. So it's actually really cool how we do it. And so that gives us the ability to have much more seamless integration with third-party apps than we could have done with the camera QR code, pure air gap style that we do on Passport today. But the goal is that we're going to be, really looking to support or really looking in the beginning to work with exactly as you said, more philosophically aligned tools and apps. So that might be wallets. That could also be other security type minded stuff. That could be password managers. Maybe there's an opportunity to do like a Bitwarden kind of integration where the passwords live on here, or maybe you unlock your password manager, from tapping on the Passport Prime screen without needing to type a master password into your phone or computer. It could also mean storing important keys for GitHub or other kinds of code signing. So I think it's not necessarily Bitcoin or crypto related. And I think that's what's so interesting about it is that typically within the industry, yes, like the key storage is so important. And obviously, the primary thing we want to do is integrate with the best wallets out there so that we can expand support to as many different wallets as possible. But we also want to enable people just to have great security. So we're already thinking of all these different use cases that like we would want for it internally. Our developers are all pushing code to GitHub, for example. That's such a common thing. Basically, every company that has any kind of software, the developers are pushing code to GitHub. They have to sign all those releases, or I should say, sign all those commits. And typically, the key to sign that is just living on your laptop, which is internet connected. So maybe there's an opportunity to move that key onto here. So it's more secure, more offline. So it's not purely like crypto wallets and everything, but the first company we are working with on a third party, essentially the first third party app for Passport Prime is with Cake Wallet. So of course,
Okay.
I'm sure your users, know that, and I'm sure
Oh yeah.
hopefully we'll be working with you guys as well.
I've heard talk. Um, and of course, I know the price point
Mhm.
of the classic passport, but how much you get a lot more clearly with the Prime kind of all in one, but how much of a difference is that going to be price wise?
It's $100 difference. So it's
Okay.
basically $199 versus $299. So it's definitely more expensive than most hardware wallets, but I think it's very competitive with Ledger's current, or I should say their like next generation products because they have the Ledger Flex for 249, which is like the smaller touchscreen e-ink device. And then they have the Ledger Stacks with that curved e-ink display at 399, which is pretty high. And so the way we looked at it and is basically if you were to add up the cost of all the devices that Passport Prime can replace, right? The hardware wallet, two YubiKeys, the hardware encrypted flash drive with call it 64 gigs of storage. So we actually have 64 gigs on device, but about 50 is usable. You're probably at like $500, $600 for that. And then you have all these single purpose devices that you can't expand the functionality of at all. Uh, Obviously, with Passport Prime, we think that not only is it great because it allows you to just buy the one thing, and I think save some money because you don't have to buy all these different things, but the idea that you can customize it how you want it, right? So if you use certain crypto wallets every day, if you want to use it with like the YubiKey style authentication, if you want to use it with other apps we'll have in the future, like a certain password manager or other kind of stuff, you get to actually install the whatever apps you want on it. You get to customize your home screen. You get to kind of build up your own, as we call it, personal security platform. Use it exactly how you want. I think there's a lot of value to that. So similar to how you might customize the home screen or the different apps that you have on your Android or on your iPhone, we're bringing similar principles to the idea of doing this on a hardware wallet like device. And that I think it's the first time anyone's doing that because right now the only device that has kind of like apps is Ledger, but their apps are simply support for new coins. So an example would be like you want to do if you were to connect Ledger. Let's say you're a developer building a wallet that has Bitcoin and Monero in it, hypothetically, right? And you want to integrate with Ledger. So you're stuck with whatever Ledger gives you. You cannot influence how anything is displayed on the screen of the Ledger device, right? So the user, if they want to do a Bitcoin transaction and then a Monero transaction, they have to open the Bitcoin app on the Ledger. They do the transaction, then they close the Bitcoin app. They open the Monero app. They do another transaction, and so that's weird because like if you just want to integrate like your wallet with Ledger, you're not able to just go build an app for your wallet for Ledger. You have to just use the different coin apps that they already have, and the user actually has to go install the apps for each coin individually through Ledger Live. So it's like a really weird experience. The way we're doing it is if you want to make an app for Passport Prime, you make an app. It has your logo, it has your UI, it has whatever stuff you support in it, and you can actually customize what do you want the screens to look like. What do you want it to say? So you're able to actually bring like your brand, your logo into our device in the same way that you would, do it if you were making an iPhone app or an Android app. So it's a really different way of doing it. And I think users are really going to like it because they're already so used to using like their smartphone that it's going to feel almost like an extension of the smartphone because you bring in the apps you want, you customize it how you want, you get your touch screen, you get the instantaneous communication with Bluetooth, but then you get to have that confidence that everything is open source, everything is made in the USA. There's no black box stuff going on in here. So you're able to get like the user experience and the design benefits without trading off on all that other, bad stuff.
So basically, what I'm hearing you say is for about 15 different reasons, it's a pretty good value just paying what, 50%
I hope
more
so.
than, yeah.
And of course, like one of the other things we do, which we probably don't do a good enough job advertising properly, even when you buy, like a current gen passport, is we give you everything that you need in the box. And so like if you buy passport today, right, you get the internal or I should say it's a user removable, but you get the lithium ion battery, of course, that's included. You'd be surprised though. There's some devices like cold cards, they don't include any batteries at all. You have to go buy like AAA's yourself. Um, you get an industrial grade micro SD card. You actually get micro SD adapters for Lightning for older iPhones and USB-C. And
I
you
did
get
notice
the
that there was
yeah,
more in the box than I expected, and that this was just with the classic passport device.
exactly, and you get free shipping within the US.
That was,
And
I didn't expect that. That was nice.
right, and so like that is the expectation I think people have when they're buying. You're spending $200, right? You're buying like a premium device. It's supposed to feel premium. It's supposed to come with everything that it needs out of the box. You shouldn't have to say, "Oh man, if I want to update the firmware, I have to go find a micro SD card." Right? I
Of
have to go buy
course,
a
and now we're
cable.
in
Yeah.
this era of buying new, $1,000 plus phones, and you don't even get the charging cord with it anymore.
Exactly, exactly. And so with Passport Prime, we're actually including a little different than with the current passport, but because we don't have a micro SD slot on here, it's not designed to be air gapped. We can do firmware updates over Bluetooth, which is really exciting because it has just a much better overall, I think, user experience for newcomers with the Bluetooth. But of course, you still get your USB cable for charging, but then we actually give you three NFC cards with it. And this is how you do backups. So, of course, you can write down your seed words if you want to, but we actually give you these three cards, and each is in its own Faraday sleeve. It's kind of cool. And we have like a label on the back so you can label them if you're the kind of person that likes to stay very organized. And then all you do when you do the setup is you just tap the card to the back of Passport Prime. And so what it does is it takes your seed, it splits it into a two of three Shamir setup. So essentially, uh, you only need two of these shares in order to recover, your wallet. And it puts two of them on the cards. And if you're okay with it, it'll actually put the third share on the Envoy mobile app and back that up automatically. So you literally like you get the device, you tap, and you're fully set up. You don't have to
This
write down the
is
seed words or anything
interesting.
like
I
that.
did not know about this part at all. I didn't see that when I was reading about it. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty large website page that walks through all the different features. So we call it Magic Backups. It's a similar thing that we do for in the Envoy mobile app. But what's really cool about the cards is that you still control the majority of the data that would allow you to get to kind of repiece together your seed words. It's in your control offline. And this is like the biggest issue that, I mean, just to hit on Ledger again with like Ledger Recover, where everyone was freaking out last year because, they announced that the seed is going, or maybe 2 years ago now, they announced the seed is being split up into three pieces in a similar Shamir setup, but it's going to three custodians. Like that
People.
is right, three or three individual companies that um, could be subpoenaed they could be forced to give up that data. And without those security issues, it allows Ledger to know, right, as we've talked about, how much money you're storing. And so with this, we don't know anything about you. We literally know nothing, but you get to maybe keep one of the cards at home, maybe keep the other one in a secure location. And if God forbid you ever lose or break your Passport Prime, as long as you have your mobile app on your phone, right? And your phone is typically backed up through Android or iCloud and it's all end-to-end encrypted. So as long as you have that Envoy app on your phone, all you need to do is tap one card and then you're back up and running. And if you lose your phone or you're unable to get to your phone or something happens like that, you just tap two cards. Maybe it's a little bit more inconvenient because you have to go find wherever you put that second card. But I think that is going to help a lot of people onboard because the seed words thing is still, I think, for most newcomers, such a confusing aspect because you've just bought this multi-$100 fancy new device and they say, okay, take out your pen and paper. We're going to write this thing down. And by the way, yes, your device has a PIN code, but if anyone finds this piece of paper, all your money's gone. So there's that aspect of it. But then also, I think seed words are probably the number one way that hardware wallet users are phished online because what happens is they get a scary phone call or scary email, and they say, hey, this is Ledger support. Your device has been compromised. You need to reinstall the firmware.
And
Go to
they
this
shouldn't even
website.
know that.
Right, like so they go on the website and it says, okay, restore your device, enter the words in. So they just type the words in, right?
Um,
And so then it's gone. And so like you can only like one of my core opinions is like you can only scale self-custody adoption so far if that is the setup experience. And people are going to hear stories about their friend who got a call and was tricked into putting those seed words in the computer, right? And all their money's gone. They're going to be afraid. So one of our goals is like let's eliminate the fear. Let's allow the setup to be 2 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And like let's make it where all that seed data is not in one place where it can be stolen trivially.
or
Um,
handled in any way by human-run
yeah.
entities.
Yeah, and this crazy stuff happens. I mean, we hear like every story. I'm sure you guys hear a lot of stories too, being a mobile wallet, but like there's crazy stuff like people will buy a hardware wallet on Amazon and the seed card comes and it's already filled out with seed words. And so they like enter them into the device.
See, with that, I feel like there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of it just normal best practices. But for somebody new to using to just cryptocurrency in general or to buying a hardware wallet, yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the reasons why hardware wallets have were we were doing so when we did the launch, there's a cool keynote that I gave, like a 20-minute keynote on our website when we announced the product uh, back in mid-December. One of the things we were doing is we were trying to calculate what percentage of crypto users are using hardware wallets. Just based on like the general available data for the number of worldwide crypto users, and then trying to ballpark the number of hardware wallets that have been sold in total, which we think is probably no more than like 15 million, like 1.5 million units, maybe closer to 10 million units. Because like if you assume Ledger is 80% of the market, you know that as of last year, they've sold 7 million total units. So you can kind of back in a little bit, right? And you could say, well, there's no way that everyone else combined sold more than like 3 million. So you kind of use those numbers, you compare it to the number of crypto users, and you're like, wait a minute, it's like 2% adoption on hardware wallets. Like that is bad. And by the way, most of these customers probably have more than one hardware wallet. Cause like, you know, I probably have 5 to 10 over the years. And so adoption is so low. It's really important that we kind of, anyone who's making wallets, whether it's software wallets, hardware wallets, we kind of pull ourselves back and say, well, it's great that we're making this stuff, but how much does it matter if 98% of the user base is on Coinbase or some other exchange? And crucially, what's going to happen over the next several years if we're going from like hundreds of millions of worldwide, crypto users to like billions, if 98% is on Coinbase, a lot of it kind of it just like defeats the purpose, right? And I'm sure it's less it's probably better numbers if you account for the software wallets too, right? Like mobile wallets and that kind of thing. So it's probably not as dire as it is in the hardware wallet side, but it's really early. So that's something we also try to think about, which is like we're so early. We need to be pushing for trying to make it easier to set up and back up, these kinds of devices.
As someone personally who hadn't, I had learned plenty about hardware wallets, but I hadn't had one before. I just really hadn't felt very confident personally in
Yeah.
anything that I had gone and read about. Um, I mean, one, kind of like you mentioned, they just don't necessarily seem terribly user friendly, a lot of them. And then two, just security related concerns. And I can only speak for the Passport device because it's the only one that I physically purchased and used, but that was not a difficult process for me. Um, and I'm happy to have kind of given that a shot actually because I have been so hesitant looking into hardware wallets before for some of the reasons that you had laid out actually.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and it's funny because like on one hand, we're in a position where I think we've done a pretty good job with Passport today, and we have, many thousands of happy users. We have, we're doing really well if you look at like the review comparison type, sites that really rank us against all the other devices. And then on the other hand, I have just felt this strong urge to make something much more usable. And so it's kind of cool because I hope that with Passport Prime, we're going to be able to really, I personally want to leapfrog Ledger, of course, because we have big goals for the company and everything like that. But I'm also hoping that we'll just be able to get, and capture a much, like a different kind of user. Not the user that has five hardware wallets, but the person that's getting their first one, right? That's been scared about it. Exactly, yeah. And we try to make the current passport as easy as possible. I still think it's the easiest compared to all the other devices out there. But you have to do like the micro SD backup if you want during setup, which is great, but like you end up having to write down this 20-digit backup code if you go that route. Or you could do the seed words and you have to write down the seed words. And I think it still doesn't capture everything that you need to go down that, personal security journey. And of course, it's limited to just Bitcoin. And so, like, one of the main goals here, and I've seen this happen now with Ledger and Trezor, is that, Ledger, I think, has done a pretty good job to give them credit for building out this app model where, like, Ledger doesn't have to go dedicate all these team resources to build support for all these new and different coins themselves. They just work with the different teams to kind of submit apps to Ledger. Ledger reviews the apps, and that's how Ledger is able to add all this coin support to their devices. And probably the reason why they're the market leader, because just like everything's supported on Ledger. And then Trezor and pretty much all the other hardware wallet companies, they actually take their own developer resources and they do it themselves. It's really hard to do that without growing the team. And you see that I think a lot of their development effort goes into like how do we support all these coins, and there then people are lobbying, add my coin, add this, add that.
I'm sure
And
you
then
get that
yeah,
many
but then
times on a daily basis.
oh, of course, of course. But then the hardware, like the device and the product stagnates because they're split, right? They're like, well, we have this team, we have to support all this stuff, and we haven't refreshed our hardware in years. And then by the time we come and update the hardware, it's basically like a refresh of the same old thing. And so you've definitely seen that with Trezor, where the new Trezor devices look exactly like the old devices. They're just a little bit more modern, but otherwise, like everything's the same. Same UI, same way of setting it up. everything's the same, which is crazy because it's like 10 years old, that UI and that setup process. And then you see other companies like Bitbox and some of the other ones. It's the same thing. It's like, well, we're going to maintain. We have so much to maintain. We have all these different coins. We have all this different stuff to do. We're going to maintain. They're never doing like the next thing. I think that we've cracked the code with Passport Prime because the idea is that we focus all of our efforts on building like the best possible device with the best possible software and delivering like the best possible platform, right, for developers. And then we go and we work with all the developers and we say, come build an app for Passport Prime. And those developers can choose to either uh, go through us and distribute the app through our Envoy mobile app, but also crucially, which Ledger like does not allow you to do, developers can distribute the app directly to their users without our permission. So you have this like permissionless dev ecosystem, which is really aligned with like our ethos, right, of sovereignty and decentralization and so on. And so we focus on building this and making it amazing, and then we court, the third party developers. And I think that's the way to do it because we're never going to be in a situation where we need to hire like 1,000 people to work on the software for this because we're stretched in so many different, directions. We just get to focus on building the platform.
And before I let this get away from me too much, I
Sure.
wanted to ask just a little bit about Envoy and kind of what all it can do and how it marries with the physical devices.
Yeah, so Envoy is great because it has two goals. One is just to make it easy to set up your passport device, whether that's, current passport or whether that's Passport Prime. Uh, you open up Envoy, it asks if you want to set up a new device, you click yes, you go through the steps, walks you through the whole onboarding. From out of the box to updating the firmware to backing it up. And then when you're done, you get to make a choice. So your choice is, do you want to use Envoy as like your Bitcoin software wallet? Or did you just want to use Envoy to set it up? And then you only open up the app when you want to do something like install a firmware update. So you kind of have like either it can be just your mobile companion app for the setup and the firmware updates, or you can actually use it as a really simple, easy to use Bitcoin software wallet as your companion to Passport. And so why that's cool is because if you're like a new user, new to Bitcoin self custody, you're like, I just want to store my Bitcoin. You can do everything within our ecosystem. So it allows you to, receive, to send. It actually allows you to one tap turn on Tor, which we're, really proud of. And we, actually collaborated with you guys on the Tor library, that's used there, which is fantastic. Um, and it also allows you to connect to your own Bitcoin node. If you're a power user, of course, you can connect your own node and then have that, better privacy associated with sending your transactions. It allows you to also have a really easy way of labeling your transactions. Obviously the technical term is coin control. We don't really call it coin control. We just call it tagging or labeling things and adding notes to transactions. So you can really organize everything. Really powerful coin control options, but really simple interface, for the user where if you want to use it, it's there. If you don't want to use it, you never have to think about it. And that's it. We don't support multi-sig. We don't support other coins. We don't support um, any kind of other, fancy stuff. We don't allow you to bring in like watch only wallets or anything like that. It's really about like if you want to have a really simple interface. Now, what's cool is you can have a built-in hot wallet. So you can have like the mobile wallet. You can have your connected passport or multiple passport devices. You can see all of that on the same screen, and you can even move, money between your hot and your cold and so on in the same app. And we're hoping at some point we'll have like Lightning support as well for the Bitcoin side. But like our goal is not to build the all-in-one everything Bitcoin wallet, right? Like we are the first people to refer our users to more power user options. So if you say, I want to use multi-sig, okay, well, we can refer you to Sparrow Wallet or Spectre or Nunchuck or one of the services like Casa or Thea. So I think that's something too that developers like about working with us is that we're always down to encourage our users to go use one of these third-party apps. We want to make it always as easy as possible to connect Passport to whatever apps you're already, using or that you want to use, as opposed to like the walled garden kind of ecosystem. So we try to be more of a use this because it's convenient to get yourself set up. Use it if you want a really simple Bitcoin wallet experience. Otherwise, we'll get you connected to the Bitcoin wallet that best suits your needs.
And I can appreciate that a lot. I kind of trying to play well with everyone and personally not a fan of the walled garden approach at all. So I love what you just said there. Um,
Thank you. Yeah, and it's funny too because like Ledger Live is a great example of the walled garden approach. Like they really want to support everything in Ledger Live because if you're using Ledger Live, they can hit you with lots of marketing type things or ads or services. Like if you ever open that app, it looks like you're just getting hit with all these different, offerings and services and stuff. They want you doing all the swaps with them. And they, of course, want to be able to store those public keys, which allow them to see your balance. And so if you don't use Ledger Live, like you have to you're required to use it for like the setup and firmware updates. But if you don't use it, then they can't see, like what you're doing with it. And so that hurts their business model. So our business models are always around it doesn't ever require that you're kind of locked into our ecosystem in order for us to make money.
I think live is an interesting choice to name a service
Yeah.
for from someone like Ledger. Eh, I don't know. I don't know that it would necessarily convey the message that you want that to, but
Well,
that's all marketing, I guess.
we called it Envoy for our app because we wanted it to be like your helpful companion almost. And we may even add cool feature like cool support features in there. We already have all of our support videos in there, which is kind of cool. If you want to figure out how to do something, you can just click on the Learn tab in the app. But I mean, hopefully we'll be able to beef that up a lot more. Our goal is that you really have like a helpful, envoy that can help get you set up and help teach you, right, how to take self-custody and use the products and everything like that. So it's really meant to be it's always meant to be more of like your companion throughout the self-custody and security journey.
And speaking of journeys, where do you think yours goes from here? I mean, you have the Passport Prime now. You mentioned some kind of updates to that coming up. Besides that, where else do you think Foundation is headed, and what are the goals that you have coming up just in the next few years, let's say?
Yeah, that's easy, but also a hard question. So in the very so Passport Prime is announced, and we're currently selling pre-orders for the early access program, which is the first 1,000 units, which should be sold out, I'm guessing, in the next month. And all the company's attention right now is like hyper focused on Passport Prime. Um, we are going to be in the factory in the next couple months. We're going to be manufacturing. It's going to be kind of crazy. We're going to be shipping and so on. But after that, I mean, our longer term vision has always been to be more of like an Apple of the industry, but obviously not closed off. Um, I would love to be able to expand to other hardware categories, but beyond any kind of security or self custody, and really become more of like a computing company. Like what do the computing needs look like for the entire industry for consumer hardware for what I mean, there's so many things you could just shout out as examples. Examples could be like node type devices, could be home mining type devices, could be phone type devices, because who knows, there could be interesting opportunity to more tightly integrate all this stuff into the phone, which has been something that, I think a lot about because, for example, you can't run a node on an iPhone. Like you're not even allowed to have background processes really on an iPhone that would allow you to do
Mhm.
that. You It even restricts wallet functionality. Like until now, I think until the latest iOS, if they even have it, you can't even do NFC payments for crypto apps. Like they lock it all down. So I think there's an opportunity for that direction. The other opportunity is more of continuing to do these types of devices. Maybe we do a lower end device because we have like our mid range, like we have our high end that's going to be shipping in the next few months, but there's definitely some lower end devices that I think often offer really crappy user experiences, but they're cheaper, right? They're more affordable. You can buy the cheapest Trezor for like maybe $80 now. You could buy like an old Ledger Nano S or something. I think they're still selling that. You could buy like a Blockstream Jade. I think the older model is around $60, $70. And we have some ideas for how to crack it at a radically better user experience with also having a really low cost for us to make while still being, open source, manufactured in the USA, and with our amazing, user experience in terms of the onboarding, the backups, and everything like that. So I could see us continue to expand the Passport, suite of products. We kind of how like there's multiple iPhones, there's like the iPhone Pro, or even like there are multiple iPods, right? There's like the iPod, the Nano, the Touch, that kind of thing. We have Passport, we have Passport Prime. Maybe we'll do a refresh to the Bitcoin only Passport, depending on what the demand looks like. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to both build the current, Passport product roadmap. We have some ideas there versus going completely to new categories. So that's how we're thinking about it.
I like that. Um, Gosh, and then you mentioned earlier that you were planning on continuing support for the classic passport for a while too, right? That's not something that you're planning
Yeah,
on phasing out at any point.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and we actually, even though we limited these to 1,000 units and like they're individually numbered and they're like lasered on, you have a number. Um, and we shipped this like 4 years ago now, maybe like 3.5, 4 years ago now. We're still supporting this one too. So like we're it's in our company. It's one of our core principles is that we care a lot about the ultra early adopters, especially the customers that were our first 1,000 customers, or in the case of this, like our first 10,000 customers, right? Like that have gotten us here with both the first and the second generation of Passport. And so, like, we actually invested a huge amount of effort to bring the UI for Passport Gen 2 back to Founders Edition because this is color screen. This one was a black and white screen. So we had to like retool everything just to get that UI onto here in black and white. But we did that so that we can make it easier to keep this up to date with the same firmware that we've been developing, for the Gen 2 Passport. And likewise, we're gonna keep putting out updates. I think probably by like this summer, Passport will be very much feature complete with the addition of MiniScript, and we'll probably just continue to update it with like security updates and support for new Bitcoin wallets that come out. And so I think there'll be regular updates, but there's not going to be any significant new features, I think, for this passport.
And
Um,
honestly, that's
yeah,
fine. I
yeah,
think it does what it needs to do and what most people would even want it to do. If you're looking for more,
yeah.
you're looking for the prime anyway.
Exactly. And we had a multi-year backlog of issues, and we've basically caught up with almost all of them. So there were a lot of like requested features that we've added in only the last 12 months for Passport. So an example is temporary seeds, or the more technical term is ephemeral seeds, kind of like seed signer mode, where you could turn on the device and you could put in a seed, or you could like scan a QR code of a seed, and the device could while it's powered on, sign from that seed. And then when you turn off the device, it's gone. Or you can do it from the UI as well when you're logged in. You could go into say, I think it's something like add temporary seed or apply temporary seed. So that was a hotly requested feature for like 2 years. We did it. So we went through the entire backlog over the last year or so. And another one was like dice rolls because people want to be able to make their seeds with dice rolls. I really disagree with that in principle because there's been all these accounts of people like making mistakes and doing stupid stuff and losing money, but we added a way where you could bring in, like, if you're doing a 12 word seed, you could bring in your 11 words that you generate, randomly yourself. You could pick them out of a hat, roll a dice, do whatever you want, put any 11 words in, and it will auto complete a 12th word that will complete the checksum so that you can bring in, these kind of make your own seed. So we did that. So check that off the list. So we've really kind of like when we're looking at our internal project management tool, on the backlog, there's almost nothing left. I think the most embarrassing one is that we don't support Miniscript yet when most of the other hardware wallets do. And the main reason for that is because we didn't think there were enough use cases to really justify us putting attention on that. And I think now there are. There's some really cool stuff in Bitcoin world. Um, there's like Liana, which is like a multi-sig tool. There's Anchor Watch, which just launched, which is multi-sig, which also gives you full insurance, which is a really cool tool. All of those require mini scripts, so now we're working on getting that in the most user-friendly way possible. So yeah, I think we'll be feature complete by summer, and we'll continue to update with security updates for as long as we can with Passport.
That's awesome to hear. I really appreciate that as someone who didn't just buy the brand new thing. I was just a few months before. I'm glad to know that that's not going to be dropped for
Yeah.
the more
Well,
extra
we'll
premium
still
experience.
we'll probably sell them in bundles too because we already have like a multi-sig bundle where you can we offer these cool concierge onboarding services for people who are totally new. We actually get something like 7 to 10% depending on the month of our customers buy a concierge onboarding package where they have like a video call with someone on our team, and they learn to get set up with their passport. We offer like a multi-sig one where it comes with 3 passports. And then we have a few different approved wallet options like Sparrow and Nunchuck, and maybe a couple others. And so we'll probably end up expanding that package to be like 1 passport prime and like 2 passports, right? So it's so that you kind of get your balance. And a lot of people are going to want to do that because some people are going to want a passport prime like at home, hidden away in a drawer in a safe, something like that. Some others are going to want to like carry it with them because they're going to be doing all their 2FA and all that kind of stuff. They take it with you when you travel, right? That kind of thing. If you're going to work, if you go to commute to an office, you take it with you, back and forth. If that's the case, you may want to use multi-sig, right, to store Bitcoin so that, you know, if someone gun to your head, right, you wouldn't be able to even spend from that wallet. And so I think there'll be, a real ability for us to offer kind of these device bundles where you get your package, you can set up your multi-sig, you can have really amazing security. Because we're doing that, because we're still selling it, we're definitely dedicated to continuing to support it.
All right. So you've done a really good job of covering things in pretty deep detail, I feel like, and giving answers to everything that I can possibly think of. But is there anything else that you wanted to make sure and get to mention here before we close things out?
Probably only to shill Passport Prime. So what we're doing is we're doing pre-orders for the first 1,000 units as part of our early access program. So for those are for the people who are excited to get their hands on, the first output from the factory of really a new generation device. And I think we'll be sold out within a month or so. And so, if you want to get your hands on one of the first Passport Primes off the line and really join our community, and be part of that, you can just go on our website at foundation.xyz and check it out, learn more, and place a pre-order for the early access program. But if you'd prefer to wait, but you do want to get in line and sign up, we are doing reservations too on the website. So you can kind of decide if you want to be one of those people that wants to pre-order and get the early access. And we give some cool benefits with that as well that are on the website, some free stuff associated with it. You can do that. Otherwise, definitely you can make a reservation and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm Zach Herbert on Twitter, or just, we have chat on our website, support and all that good kind of stuff. And, would love any feedback. And then also, we are going to be putting up on the website soon some more information for developers. And so, if anyone listening, if you have popular apps that you like to use, wallets, other security related services, let us know. Let them know, to reach out to us because what we're going to start doing this quarter is, signing up third party developers and wallets and that kind of thing to build apps for Passport Prime. We're going to be preparing the developer kit, for mid-year launch, and I'm really excited about that. So that's also another way you could help us out because we really want to hear from the community, what you guys want, what kind of apps and wallets that you want us to focus on helping get integrated.
All right. And as far as social media goes, anything like that, I don't know if you have much of a presence in the way of that, where maybe you would release
Yeah.
news about things, but is there anything else you'd like to shill in the way of
Yeah,
that?
so it's mainly on Twitter. So it's just a foundation on Twitter. Foundation, I think it's like DVCS or something for devices. And that's where we do most of our communication. Of course, we have a mailing list, like an email list on our website. And we also have like a community type group. So it's our own self-hosted forum. If you're the kind of person that really wants to get involved and come in and ask a lot of questions and give a lot of feedback, you can definitely welcome to join us. I think that's at community.foundation.xyz.
Great. And then just you yourself, do you have anything else to throw out there for you?
No, no, it's just me, Zach Herbert on Twitter. If you want to get in touch, best way is just to DM me on Twitter.
All right, great. Well, I guess that wraps things up then. Thank you so much for answering so many questions and for doing such a good job of covering everything in depth. I
For
appreciate
sure.
that.
Yeah. Thanks, Alexa. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too.